A used car salesman says to a customer, these prices are so good, I actually lose money on every sale. The customer looks confused and asks, then how do you make a profit? The salesman smiles and says, volume. This old joke mirrors a situation we run into frequently on our shows. A theist calls in, claiming to have evidence for their existence of their God. The host then shows how their evidence doesn't actually support their conclusion. Then the theist backpedals. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm not saying this definitely proves God on its own. It's just part of a cumulative case. You have to consider the preponderance of the evidence. Well, if you want to build a cumulative case for God, you have to have something to accumulate. 0 plus 0 is still 0, no matter how many more zeros you add on. Do you think I'm missing some important nuance here? If so, then give us a call and talk to us, because the show is starting right now. All right. Welcome. This is Talk Heathen, and I am your host, Scott Dickie, and I'm here today with Richard Gilliver. How you doing today, Richard?
I'm very, very good. I'm fired up. I'm fired up this week. I'm hoping the philosophical caller calls back from last week, and I won all those theists, everyone, the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of you who comment on the ACA Facebook page. I'm going to mention you like I do every week, and who criticize our hosts weekly on that Facebook page. And when you're invited to call in, you never do so. Come on, please have the courage of your convictions and give us a call instead of hiding behind the keyboard. The keyboard can't argue for you. Call in.
All right. So the gauntlet has been thrown by Richard. Call us in. Talk Heathen is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. We are a live call-in show, and we have open lines, so get your calls in. You can call us on the phone at 512-991-9242 or on your computer at tiny.cc/callth. So Richard, at the top of the show here, I wanted to talk a little bit about super chats. We're doing something a little different this week. Super chats, as some of you may know, are a way that you can support our show and support the ACA in general by making donations via the YouTube chat facility during the show. And so this week we're doing our super chat challenge is so anybody that sends in a super chat, we're going to take a word out of your super chat, or if you want to specify a word, you can do that, but we're going to take that word out, and then at the end of the show, we're going to make a parable using all of the words that you've given us, something that you might find in some kind of holy scripture. So anybody that sends in a super chat, you can either indicate a word you want, or if you don't, then we'll just pick a word out of that, and then we'll incorporate that into this parable at the end. In addition to that, though, we at Talk Heathen have challenged the hosts of both Truth Wanted and the Atheist Experience to a super chat challenge this week. And so whoever gets whichever show gets the most dollar donations during the show, then they win, and then whoever has the least, then they lose. And so the winner gets to choose the stakes that the loser will have inflicted upon them, or they have to be a bad thing, although let's be honest, it probably will be. But so that's the deal. So please feel free to donate to us with your super chats today. You'll not only be contributing to this parable that we're putting together, but you will also be helping Talk Heathen dominate its sister shows. All right. So before we do anything else, though, I want to talk about our question of the week. So it's our Talk Heathen to Me segments where we get into this question of the week. Richard, why don't you take this over? Can you deal with our question of the week this week?
Yeah, absolutely. So this week's question of the week, the top three answers from last week was what is God's kryptonite? And our top three answers are: number 3, Miranda Rensberger, God's kryptonite, iron chariots. Scott, I think that one's been well established, hasn't it?
Yeah. I think that one even has biblical backing, I think.
Yeah.
So it's right there.
Is it just iron, or is it specifically an iron chariot? I need to know the nuances of God's weakness.
That's true.
Here.
Does a car count as a modern day iron chariot?
Yeah, if it's made of if it's made of
Interesting.
iron, does
All
it?
right.
Interesting. Number 2 is Graham Jones, God's Kryptonite, showing up in person. Yeah, not particularly good at that one. Even when it did show up in person in the New Testament, according to Christian theology, it had to be in person form. Of course, they did show up a couple of times in the Old Testament, and there are varying contradictory claims about whether he actually appeared or whether he didn't appear, whether people saw him face to face, whether people would die if they saw him face to face. It's not like the Bible contains any contradictions, of course. And number 1 is Chuck Gados, who says God's Kryptonite in the US. Televised football on Sunday. Scott, I'll let you deal with that one.
True enough. I mean, it's hard to argue you can't argue with the numbers. You can't argue with the numbers. So I think those are definitely some good answers. So our prompt for next week is going to be this question: how did Noah keep the animals in line? So put your answer below the video in the comments, not in the live chat, but in the comments below. And then next week, we're going to reveal the top 3 answers. But Richard, let me get your answer first. How did Noah keep the animals in line?
Yeah, I think this is quite an easy one. I think he did like all the other occasions in the Old Testament where God simply threatens everyone if they don't do what he says. So the way God kept the animals in the line is by threatening them with Moses' armies who would go out and kill them all except for the young virgin girl animals amongst them, who would be distributed amongst their captors.
Vicious, ruthless, I would say. I have an answer that I will contribute as well. I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think that Noah kept the animals in line because he promised to make the Garden of Eden great again. And he was going to lower the price of milk and honey on day 1. And after that, they all just fell in line and everything was good from then on out. So we want to hear more answers from all of you out there. So remember, put it in the comment section below this video. And next week, we'll read off the top 3. Great answers all around so far. I'm anxious to see what our audience can come up with. And we do have some calls on the line. We have some open lines. So if you want to call in, please do so. But before we get to our call, I just want to give a shout out to the crew. So let's show that crew cam. We could show the video people, audio people, moderators, note takers, and call screeners. We couldn't do the show without these people. So thank you for all of the effort that you do to allow me and Richard to just talk on the show here. So thank you to the crew.
What a handsome bunch. What a
definitely.
They are. I just want to quickly address, before we move on, I do want to quickly address someone, I think it was Proud Rebel in the chat, who asked me what's up with my background. That's very simple. My background is God buying slaves, because God is very comfortable with that, as many Christian apologists have written during this American slave trade. People like Reverend Thornton Stringfellow, who wrote no less than 2 books on the subjects of why it was biblically justified to buy and sell slaves. So if you disagree with that, and your fellow Christian, Thornton Stringfellow, give us a call and let's have that conversation.
Yeah, let's talk about it. So it was a challenge. That's your answer. Your background is a challenge to the viewers out there. If you want to call and talk about this, definitely give us a call and we'll be happy to talk about that. But we do have a caller on the line here. Let's bring up Cows Are Friends. She, her from the Netherlands wants to have a discussion on something I think Richard just knows nothing about, and that is Buddhism. Cows Are Friends, can you hear us?
Hi, Scott. Hi, Richard. Thanks for taking my call.
All right, my pleasure. What's on your mind today?
I've talked a few times with Richard, both on the ACD After Show and through email. As a Buddhist myself, I'm very happy that someone on a show like this actually does know a bit about Buddhism, because Richard does actually know quite a bit about Buddhism. Unfortunately, you don't really get a lot of Buddhist scholars, so we don't often get to hear you talk about the subjects. So I decided to call in.
All right.
Yeah, and I just want to say I'm glad Cal's a friend did call in, because she did express a little bit of nervousness, if you don't mind me saying, Cal's a friend at doing so. But I'm so glad you have called in, and I believe we were going to discuss the supernatural elements of Buddhism and Buddhist belief, because a lot of people, as we know, especially who follow Western Buddhism, don't believe that there are any supernatural elements in Buddhism. And it wouldn't be correct to say that, those Western Buddhists are not practicing Buddhism correctly, because, of course, Western Buddhism and secular Buddhism is a legitimate form of Buddhism. But to make the blanket statement that Buddhism does not contain supernatural elements is both wrong and contrary to the Buddhist scriptures. So, and I know Cal's a friend is someone who believes in the supernatural elements. And this, for me, is one of the most interesting calls that we could possibly take on this show, because it's something that we don't discuss very much anyway, Buddhism, but especially the supernatural beliefs within Buddhism. So I'm really, really interested in this. Cal's a friend. What are the kind of specific points of the supernatural that you believe within Buddhism?
So for me, I think the most important one is the fact that the Buddha was actually an enlightened being. So from that,
what do you mean by that? What does enlightenment mean in that context? Sorry to interrupt.
Yes. No, that's totally fine. So in Buddhism, there's something called the cycle of rebirth, samsara. So there's this idea that we get born, we live a life, we die, we get reborn somewhere else. And this is an enormous source of suffering. And to escape that suffering, you have to break the cycle. And breaking this cycle, that is enlightenment.
So just breaking the cycle of suffering, is that supernatural?
I mean, so maybe let's dial back a little bit and talk about the terminology of supernatural here. Buddhism does hold that really everything in the universe is causal. So there is not really like something like divine intervention or miracles to intervene in the normal causal processes that the universe has. So in a sense, it could be said that there is no supernatural in Buddhism. But of course, when people use the term supernatural, generally they mean like spooky, out there stuff, like rebirth, like karma, like gods, like heavens and hells. And all of these things, they are very much in Buddhism. If these things were not in Buddhism, if there was no rebirth, if there were no other realms, if none of that was there, then the end of suffering would actually be pretty simple. Like, we would just die at some point in our life, at the end, probably, presumably, and that will be it. Suffering is over. But because there's this rebirth, suffering would not be over at the end of a life.
Richard, do you have anything to say on that?
I'm interested in your take on it, Scott, and whether you're following that, and because it can be quite a complex subject. So, as the non-Buddhist kind of in the room, if you like, not that I'm a practicing Buddhist, but I'm well read on this subject. What is your take on that?
Well, so breaking the cycle of suffering, but the cycle of suffering is caused from the rebirth. Is that right? So you keep continuing on, even at the end of this life, you start another life and so on, and you just continue that suffering until you achieve this state of enlightenment. Are we talking about like a cognitive enlightenment, or is this like some kind of magical spiritual enlightenment, whatever that means? I'm still not entirely sure what you mean by what is meant by enlightenment. I know I've heard that phrase before. I've heard that said before, but it never really kind of sunk in what exactly was meant. What is that? Something that somebody could accomplish without Buddhism?
Yeah.
know,
Okay. So in Buddhism, the kind of suffering is caused ultimately by, we could, to simplify it, call it attachment. So we're attached to various things, and because of this attachment, it causes suffering. A very, very simple way of kind of demonstrating this is by saying we want to eat a cake. We have the desire to eat this cake, so we have this attachment to eating this cake. We eat this cake and we eat this cake and we get to a point where we're satisfied. But because of our attachment to this cake and our desire to continue eating it, we continue to eating it, and then we feel really sick and we start to suffer because of it. Now, that writ large is kind of the thing that keeps us being reborn within Buddhist theology, if you like. And the end of suffering is when we become enlightened. And what enlightenment is called, what it's described as, is as if a candle has been snuffed out. That's the kind of one of the descriptions given for it. So we get to this, and there are two stages to enlightenment. So our human physical body is the result of our previous desire and our previous attachment. But of course, the Buddha became enlightened. So he still had these fetters remaining, which were the result of all this desire and attachment, even though he became enlightened. So that's the first stage of enlightenment, the realization and this kind of snuffing out process beginning, where you're no longer going to be reborn. And then at the end of his physical life, so the first stage is called Nibbana, reaching enlightenment. The second stage, when the physical body, the remaining fetters of this attachment fall away, that's called Parinibbana. And that's when everything falls away. There is no more attachment to anything. There are no more results of any of this attachment. And that's what Nirvana is. Nirvana is the release of all this attachment that we've had to things. And the processes of getting rid of that are ever more subtle within Buddhist thought. But that's kind of the what we're aiming for. We're aiming for this final release throughout all these eons, countless eons. There is no beginning of time in Buddhism. There are countless eons of these lives that go on and on and on and on until Nirvana is reached. Am I on the right lines there, Cowser friend?
I could not have said that better. That was very good.
So then the reincarnation or rebirth is that an indication that you have failed in the previous life, and that you kind of like if you don't pass second grade, you have to go back and redo it. Is that kind of what's happening here?
Yeah, in a black and white way. Yeah.
Okay.
In here. Sorry, yeah, failure is kind of the expectation here, unfortunately. It is because we don't know what is actually happening, our ignorance of these processes, that it just keeps happening again and again. So it's actually, it's a very tragic thing in Buddhism, which is why it is so good that a Buddha comes in the world and teaches the way out.
So let's talk about these supernatural elements. So we've got to the point where we've realized that if we're following kind of scriptural Buddhist ideas, and we're holding to ideas of karma and rebirth, that there is supernatural within Buddhism, and this is something I take it you believe, Cal's a friend. So what is it that convinces you that this element of Buddhism is true?
I mean, I think my answer is going to be a little bit boring. It is just fate. Like, I did not start out my journey into Buddhism being convinced of the supernatural aspects of Buddhism. What I got started with was like questions like what actually is consciousness, like what causes the body to move around, like those kinds of things. That is the sort of answers I started looking for. And reading the Buddhist scriptures and finding some answers there, and then also sort of applying techniques that are described in the Buddhist scriptures in my life, and seeing that they actually help me like get over some anger issues, for example, or get over some big attachments that I had in my life. Like, these things increased my confidence in the teaching and in the Buddha. And extended from that, I'm willing to extend that confidence into aspects where I cannot directly verify that it is true.
So if we take that as because I've had a similar conversation with the abbot of a Buddhist monastery, and I've had I asked him the question: if someone doesn't believe in these things, in these supernatural elements, how are they going to be convinced about them? And the answer I got from the abbot of the Buddhist monastery was, you just believe it. Kind of the Occam's razor, fake it till you make it, was the kind of paraphrase of what I got from him. So you've been convinced by certain Buddhist practices. Let's just say, for example, meditation has increased your confidence, that practicing that has made your suffering decrease. So you see some truth in the Buddhist scriptures. How do you relate that to the supernatural elements? Why does specifically things that we know are mundane increase your confidence of something that is supernatural? What are the specific elements that make that convincing for you?
I mean, I don't think there is a very direct connection in the sense of, like, I did something in meditation and now I believe more in the supernatural. It is that, to me, Buddhism is kind of a package deal. Like, there are the early Buddhist texts, they very clearly describe what is important in terms of teachings. And if for some of those I can verify very easily for myself that it's actually very helpful, and then some of it I can't, but also it's not like actively hurting me or anything, at that point I'm willing to extend some benefits of the doubt towards that.
But do you not see that occurs in other religions? How would you say that that's not the case in other religions as well? So, for example, we might say that a Christian prays. A Christian is told to pray in the Christian texts. They pray. It brings benefit to their lives by praying. It makes them more calm. It makes them more reflective. It brings benefits to their lives from doing that. And because of that, they are then convinced of the resurrection of Jesus. But you clearly don't accept the resurrection of Jesus. So what would you say is the difference? But if we're going to apply the criteria fairly across the board, what would you say the difference is between doing that within a Buddhist context and doing that within a Christian context?
So I'm afraid I will just have to special plead. Like, I like Buddhism and I don't like Christianity. So if we are like going for like one principle to it, like evenly applied to other religions,
they had their chance and they blew it. So you ended up with Buddhism. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, no, I was never seriously, or I was just never a Christian. It's not like my tradition. But I think it is.
But you were saying that you feel like this is evidence to you of these. Sorry for interrupting. You were saying that you feel like these outcomes are convincing you, are telling you that there's this supernatural thing happening. What Richard was saying is that other people also make the same claim. In addition to that, many people who do not make any attachment to anything supernatural can also affect those positive changes in their life just by, sometimes it's just a change of attitude. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of action on a person's part. How do you make that last little jump into the supernatural boat?
So again, I don't think there is really anything that makes a leap. I think it is the same sort of faith that a Christian would also have in their religion, if I'm being very honest. I don't think my faith is special, like more true or more justified than that of a Christian. Maybe like the only thing I could think of is that I am very careful that I don't believe things that I believe are harmful. and that if I see that something I believe is harmful, that I try to abandon it. But maybe a Christian also does that with their faith, and in which case I don't really see a difference.
Do you not think that's slightly contradictory though, that you'll accept something or have faith in something as true that has no more justification than something else, just because you don't consider it harmful where you consider the other thing to be harmful? Don't you think that might be a problem of kind of a way of seeing the world and assessing information in the world?
It is certainly not how I would do this in any other area of my life. So again, this is because I hold Buddhism in a very special place in my mind that I'm willing to go so far for it.
Let me ask you one question here, Kauser friends. Do you actually believe that these supernatural elements are real or true? Or do you just find that if you not necessarily believe in them, but kind of lean towards them, or if you give them free reign or whatever, you kind of have faith in them? Do you find that the effects of having that belief, is that worth it for you? Or, I mean, because certainly there are true things that are harmful. I mean, I don't think you would disagree with that, would you? I mean, there are things that are true that do cause harm.
Yeah, so as for how much I believe in the supernatural things, I would definitely say that it's not even across the board. There are things in the suttas that I have much less faith in than others. For example, there is a very elaborate description of various kinds of gods in the suttas. And I think that's very interesting from sort of a religious studies historical perspective. It's not necessarily that I believe that every single god that is described there is actually a real being that exists. But when we get to something like the possibility for enlightenment or the position of karma, like I do hold that with a lot more confidence, or a lot more importance to my practice, I should say, maybe.
So you would say, or you would hold from your position, and I'm going to try and steal your money here. You would hold from your position the kind of something along the lines of school of Buddhist ethics, which is doing those things that are beneficial, you should kind of follow, and those things which aren't beneficial to the practice, to the path of practice, should be let go of. And that's the kind of, you take that attitude as well to the supernatural elements of Buddhism. Those that are said in the scriptures to relate to directly to practice, like things like karma, rebirth, nibbana. Because they relate to the path of practice, you have more conviction and faith that they are true, and the things that aren't so important to the path of practice, like kind of the descriptions of particular gods or particular supernatural powers that can be developed through meditation, according to the scriptures, you're not so concerned with those things. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes. Thank you for steelmanning me like that. I think that is accurate, yes.
Is that a common approach in Buddhism?
I would say so, yes. I'm sure it will depend on who you ask, but I think it is actually found in like the early Buddhist texts that this is a good approach to take.
Is there anything in the Buddhist text that you feel is harmful, or that you disregard? I mean, do you cast aside the stuff that you don't like, or is the reason that you landed on Buddhism because it already kind of sums up all of your beliefs? I mean, I think it's admirable to be in favor of things that don't cause harm and that are helpful to people and that kind of thing. Is that what kind of I guess what I'm asking is, did you end up a Buddhist because it was comfortable for you to have religious beliefs, knowing that the effects of those beliefs were positive? Do you feel like that allowed you to make that leap from being somebody who doesn't believe in supernatural to somebody who does believe in supernatural? Did that kind of give you a justification, quote unquote, to hold those beliefs?
Well, I think I already considered myself a Buddhist long before I accepted any of its supernatural aspects. And it's not that I searched out Buddhism because I was looking for something that already agreed with me. Though, I mean, I guess to some extent there was that, like the things like there not being a soul in Buddhism, there not being a creator God in Buddhism, that kind of thing really appealed to me. Like I come from a more atheist background, so there being a religion, or like as I thought of it at the time, a philosophy that said such thing was definitely appealing to me. But
how did, Councillor Friend, if you don't mind me interrupting, on that point, how did you kind of, because you've just said, as you know, coming from an atheist background, you didn't believe in a soul, or you didn't believe in a God, a creator God specifically, and yet there is something which we could call soul adjacent in Buddhism, which is the five khandhas, which is a thing that is reborn, and there are certainly gods and supernatural beings within Buddhism, even though they're not creator gods. So how did you, when you kind of came from this system of being an atheist and having no belief in any of this, and rejecting kind of a creator God and a soul, these aspects which you didn't find that were true and you didn't find appealing, and then you come across their kind of the reflections of those in Buddhism, which were said to be true. How did you kind of approach that? We kind of hesitant at first to accept that these things were true, or was it just a case of, well, the Buddha say the scripture says these things are true, so therefore I'm going to accept that they are true until such a point where they demonstrate themselves to be true to me?
Well, so first of all, I don't think I would agree with you that the five khandhas are really soul-like. Not sure.
No, but they are adjacent to the soul. I mean, if we're going to talk about reincarnation, you know, in Hinduism, it is a soul. It is a spark of God, a soul, the Atman that is reincarnated. It is a soul. We would call it a soul. And in Buddhism, it is anatta. It is the negation of that soul. But there is still something that is reborn. There are still these clinging attributes. So we could still say that they are soul adjacent, even though we wouldn't identify them as a soul. We could still say, from the point of view of the functionality between someone who believes in Atman, something that is a soul that is reincarnated, and someone who believes in Anatman or Anatta, this idea that these clinging attributes that are reincarnated, from the perspective of the functionality of it, there is still something being reincarnated. So we could say it's soul adjacent. I think that's a fair description to have.
I mean, I would say that it is more the continuation of a process than the actually lifting of substance from one life to another. But again, I feel like we're really getting into details of what it means to be reborn in there. To maybe get to your actual question before, when I started out in Buddhism, I didn't believe any of this. I didn't believe in rebirth. I did not believe in gods or other realms or any of that stuff. I was able to ignore those things because at a service level, Buddhism really does not require you to believe any of those things. If you are getting started or your Buddhist path, it is a lot more simple. Like there's a lot of the teaching that you can just apply to this single life as if there is no other life. And it's already useful. So it is because it was already useful for me at that time that I stuck with it, and that over time my faith grew to also encompass those other things.
Do you think that you were saying that it's many people don't believe in the supernatural aspects, and so you started out as an atheist? Do you think that was maybe like a bridge to where you are now, that you enjoyed it because you felt like these beliefs were positive, that they were helpful, and do you think that eventually that maybe it softened you up? Maybe it was a gateway drug, right? So you started out with some of these Buddhist beliefs, but then later on some of the supernatural aspects were added in. Do you think that's what made it attractive to you as a belief system?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is fair. Yes, that a lot of the things that I initially engaged with in Buddhism were very much in line with the sort of things that I believed as an atheist. So that made the transition into Buddhism easier, for sure.
Well, this is really fascinating, Kauser friends. We do have other callers piling up here, and so but I just wanted to give either you and or Richard an opportunity to make a last comment or a question, or if there's any way we want to wrap this one up.
Kauser friend.
I just want to thank you very much for taking my call, and I hope you will have a good rest of your show.
All right. Thanks so much. And we really appreciate you calling in. Like we were saying before, we don't get many callers that, that want to talk about Buddhism or some of these more obscure, at least in the United States, that are a little bit more obscure. And so we do definitely appreciate it when people call in to talk about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one thing I really appreciate about that call by Kauser friend is she was quite open. And this is something we don't see with a lot. It's not universal amongst our Christian callers, but it's something that we rarely see amongst our Christian callers, is this idea that, yes, I do hold this as kind of a crutch. I believe this on faith because the scriptures tell me it's true, and I have nothing to justify it. And I really appreciate that sentiment. I really, really do. And, I think it's important to encourage people, regardless of what they believe, regardless of what tradition they're from or what background, that it's really, really important to have justification for the things that you believe and not just to hold stuff for the sake of holding it. I think I also wanted just to go through a couple of the things, because a lot of people in the West don't actually think that Buddhism has any supernatural elements. I just want to kind of give you an example of this. Is reportedly what the Buddha himself said when he was talking about monks having attained a certain stage of progress to the path of enlightenment. And these are the supernatural powers that they will obtain. This is from the Samanapala Sutta, which is found in Digha Nikaya 2. So he says, when his mind is thus concentrated, purified and bright, unblemished and free from defects, and it goes on with several other things, it says, he wields manifold supernormal powers. Having become one, he becomes many. Having become many, he becomes one. He appears, he vanishes, he goes unimpeded through walls, ramparts, and mountains, as if through space. He dives in and out of earth as if it was water. He walks on water without sinking, as if it was dry land. Sitting cross-legged, he flies through the air like a winged bird. With his hand he touches and strokes even the sun and moon, so mighty and powerful. And that's just one example from one sutra of the many, many different supernatural powers that the Buddha says you can gain, that the Buddha himself says you can gain through practicing meditation and kind of making progress along the path to enlightenment. There are supernatural elements in Buddhism, people. It's really, really worth going and having a look at. But we have many other calls. Scott, have we got any announcements before we take the next one? We do,
yes. Before we dive into some more calls, we're going to, we have some exciting news from Sophia Spino, one of our fellow Talk Heathen hosts. Sophia, take it away.
Calling all free thinkers. We are excited to announce that the ACA is launching its first ever fundraising campaign, Amplify ACA, in partnership with Amplify Austin. This is your chance to expand our impact by making your voices heard and supporting the shows that you love.
We invite you to join us on March 5th starting at 6 p.m. We're going to be doing a 24-hour fundraising event and camp out live at the Free Thought Library in Austin, Texas. We've got a great show in the works, a whole variety hour with our hosts doing different things, not just taking calls like you're used to, but we're going to have the fun facts and playing some games and lots of different activities. So be sure to join us from that. Again, it's going to be really exciting, and we're looking forward to having as many people involved as we possibly can.
Donating is easy on amplifyatx.org. Just search the word atheist and click the donate button. Follow us on our socials for more information.
And this is important. We want to be able to amplify the voices of reason and compassion worldwide. So we ask you, please, donate on Amplify Austin Day to make a real difference.
Thank you, Ben, Sophia, and Jamie. Yes, this is our first ever major fundraising campaign, and we need your help to make it a success. Mark your calendars for March 5th and 6th. March 5th at 6 p.m. for our fundraising kickoff party and our 24-hour live stream. Come on down to the Free Thought Library if you're in Austin, or join us online via the Atheist Experience channel. Make a plan to donate, and let's amplify the ACA together. That was a wonderful announcement there from Sophia and Ben and Jamie. You know, I was thinking they should probably record that one of these days rather than making them come into the studio every week to say, never mind. Okay. All right. I am a dad, so, you know, you got to cut me a little slack on the jokes here. But all right, let's go back to callers here. We do have some theist callers on the line, and so we want to make sure we get to them. But we still have some open lines, so please keep calling in with your calls, and also keep the super chats coming. We've are accumulating a little pile of super chats, but before we deal with those, let's talk to Benji. Benji is him in Alabama, and Benji wants to talk about some problems with indoctrination as it relates to the problem of evil. Benji, how are you doing today?
I'm good. This wouldn't be secularity, would it?
Secularity is not on today, although he will be on the Eighth Experience a little later on.
Oh, okay, good. So I called in last week, but I wasn't able to get a hold, on the line. And I was going to talk about the problem of indoctrination first, because this is one of the other reasons I wasn't able to call in. I've been in jail for like 3 months, which kind of sucks. And while I was gone, somebody broke in my house and a whole bunch of other stuff.
No.
But so when I was in the jail, they had these preachers coming in, and these preachers would come in and visit people, yada yada yada, and they would preach about different things. And me being me and knowing what I know and the history of the Bible and all that good stuff, I decided to go up to the preacher and I give him a task, and I say, and I actually told him to call in to y'all. I don't know if he's ever going to. But I told him, I said, God is, I didn't really say that he's evil, which, in some case, in some ways, yeah. But I basically told the preacher, I said, have you read Exodus 21? I kind of pulled a Matt Dillahunty, and I was trying to see if the preacher knew his Bible, because a lot of preachers, they preach from different parts of the Bible, and they don't take the time to actually read the thing. They just go off what they was taught as a kid. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. And they go off what they was taught as a kid. And so, challenging them on stuff and trying to open their eyes to what it actually says is difficult. Not that difficult, but it is difficult because they don't want to admit to it. And in particular, this preacher, he had, and I forget which fallacy it is. I do know it's a fallacy, though. There's been a few people that call in and did this. But basically, his excuse was, he's God. and he's God, so it makes it right, essentially, is what his argument was. And,
so let me interject here real quick here, Benji. I want to try to summarize what you're saying here. Are you saying that it's indoctrination that leads people into the wrong version of Christianity? Is that what you're saying? Are you suggesting that it's diverting people that could be good Christians into the bad Christianity? Is that what you're?
Well, actually, I think all Christianity is bad. I do believe in God, but I'm more of a Gnostic. And my belief system is very old. Actually, it's like the first sets of Christianity, that kind of stuff. That's more my belief system. So heaven, hell, limbo, God isn't all good. I don't believe in the Trinity either. That was added on by the Catholic Church later on. But I mean, it's just, there's a bunch of problems with it. And then when I try to point it out to people, they don't want to listen to it. And I don't know if it's just willful ignorance or if it's because they don't know their own Bible.
But rather than talking about the problems, Ben, rather than talking about the problems with the Bible, which I'm sure myself, you and Scott may largely agree on, what is it specifically that you believe regarding God that we might disagree with you on? Because this is what this show's about. It's about exploring ideas together. And rather than just, we don't want to just sit around in a great big circle jerk talking about shit we agree on. That's boring. That's not interesting for anyone. Let's talk about the stuff we disagree on. So what is it that convinces you that God exists?
Well, I've had personal experiences, but also just the level of gods and, just gods in general throughout history, they're inconsistent with each other in some ways. But there's been gods and religions and things way before Christianity was even thought of. Babylonia or Mesopotamia, paganism, sacrifice, all that kind of stuff. I believe that predates Christianity.
So what is it that convinces you that the God that you believe in is true? Because we can agree that there have been many gods throughout history, many of them mutually exclusive. They cannot exist alongside each other. So what specifically about your God is it that convinces you that it exists?
Well, mainly just, and I don't really want to fall into the watchmaker trap here, but basically, well, I think there's a higher being, but I don't know. I wouldn't really necessarily call it God, because if the definition of God is something that can be all powerful, it's kind of self-contradictory in some senses, because if God was all-knowing and all-powerful and all good...
Benji, forgive me again. Sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting you. I'm just trying to keep the call on track. We're not so bothered about what you don't believe in, the kind of God concepts and the theologies that you don't accept. I'm asking you about the one that you do accept. What convinces you that being exists?
Right. Whether you call it a God or not, how do if you believe in a higher, quote unquote, higher being or higher power, why?
Well, just personal experience mostly, and life experience.
Okay, well, I would love to talk to you about personal experience. I just want to set it aside for 1 second. Is there anything other than personal experience that you would add on before we jump down that very, very deep hole that is labeled personal experience? Is there anything other than that you would? Let me ask you this in the context of your original comment. Do you feel like you could have been indoctrinated? Do you think indoctrination has contributed at all to your beliefs in your higher power?
No, because my belief system is one that not many people even do anymore. And the ones that are around here, at least in my area, Southern Baptist, Church of Christ, Methodist, which I have been in those churches, Catholic Church, Methodist Church, Baptist Church. I've been all over.
Okay.
And I went between them, and they have different belief systems, but I usually go to church just to go to church, if that makes sense.
Okay, so if there is there anything other than personal experience that leads you to believe there's a God? And I would like to talk about that personal experience in a second here, if you'd like to. But before we do that, is there anything else? Or is it only personal experience?
Just my life and personal experience.
Okay, so can you share with us some of that personal experience? Like, what was happening the day that you realized, wait a minute, I believe in this higher power?
Well, I mean, I've always believed in Jesus, but I also recognize that there was a lot of text and telephone, essentially, and that it is possible that some of that stuff probably didn't happen the way that it says it did. But
you're still focusing on why you're not believing these other beliefs. We're asking you, why do you believe? And so what is the personal experience that led you to believe, yes, there is a higher power?
Well, I died in a stadium, and then, which I don't know if this was my brain or not, essentially, but I died in a stadium, and I was standing above my body, and I wasn't floating. I was just standing in front of myself at that point.
We have discussed, Ben, I don't wish to interrupt you, but we have discussed this particular incident with you before when we had a medical doctor on the show who kind of went into great detail in explaining the process of dying and how that operates. We have a lot of callers on the line, and I don't particularly want to cover old ground with you. So is there anything other than that experience which we've already kind of talked about? And if viewers are interested in that conversation, go and find that episode. It is up on YouTube, and you can listen to it there. Is there anything other than that particular experience that convinced you, or is that the sole experience that convinced you?
Well, yeah, kind of. I mean, I've always believed in Jesus somewhat. I was, pretty much. And then I was also going to talk about the problem of evil. But...
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate your candidness there. And like I said with the previous caller, I very, very do much appreciate when callers call in and are open and honest and will draw lines under, where things have, where they might have doubts and things. I do appreciate that. I think what I would suggest, because we have got a lot of callers, is go back and listen to that episode again that you called in on with Dr. Ben, and kind of look at what Dr. Ben was saying to you. If you want to call us back on the same subject, because it is an interesting subject, but I don't want to cover old ground. So what I would suggest you do is you go and re-listen to that call where you had that conversation. Yeah, pick out the parts where you disagree with what Dr. Ben's saying and call us back and let's have a discussion, preferably when Ben's hosting, which will be next week, I believe. Give us a call back.
Well, see, the only thing I disagree with on that is that the senses can be unreliable, and I actually have listened to that video.
But we know.
Okay,
so Ben, we know that human senses can be unreliable. I would implore you to go and read psychological studies on this, whether it's just perception, the way we perceive things, whether it's memory. There's countless sources in neurology and psychology, many studies which demonstrate that the senses can be unreliable. I'm writing a book on this very subject, on epistemology, on skepticism, on how we assess the world around us. And the first 2 chapters of that book, laying the groundwork for the rest of the book, are all about how senses are unreliable, how our brain tricks us. It's very, very important to know this stuff. So if you're in doubt on that, go and have a look at those studies. Just type into Google, are our senses unreliable? Is our assessment of the world unreliable? Is our brain unreliable? And you will get countless results back pointing you in the right direction. So I'm going to let you go, Ben.
That's all we have to gauge our reality.
It is, and there are ways we can gauge that reality while taking the fact that our senses are unreliable into consideration. But I'm going to let you go, Ben. I appreciate your call. I do like to give callers the time to have the conversation, and we have a lot of callers on the lines today, and I don't really want to. I want to try and get through as many as possible, and I don't want to kind of rehash old ground. So it's not that I'm not interested in the conversation with Ben. I just don't want to cover the ground we've had before. And I think if he goes and looks at some of the details from those previous conversations, we can have a much more interesting conversation without covering that old ground. So
for sure. Yep. So let's, before we jump into another call, I got a couple other announcements I want to read here. Available at tiny.cc/ACA flyers. We have these printable call-in flyers. You can post them with permission, of course, to community bulletin boards so people know that they should call our show and defend their faith. If you do post any flyers, make sure to snap a picture of it in place and send it to tv@atheist-community.org, and we may feature your photo in an upcoming show. And one other thing, we do have merch. You might have noticed I'm drinking from my Talk Heathen mug here today. You too can get one of those mugs. You can go to find your Talk Heathen merch at tiny.cc/merch-ACA, and you can get tees, hoodies, crop tops, hats, etc., mugs, of course, all kinds of Talk Heathen swag and other ACA stuff as well. So please take a look at that if you're interested. And now we will go into another call. I would like to pick up a call here. This is not a theist caller, but it was related to an earlier call. I'd like to talk to Dee real quick here. Dee, they, them from Iowa, a frequent caller, is asking, where does karma figure in this cycle of rebirth? Dee, are you with us here?
Yes, I am. Hi, guys.
Hi,
Dee. Welcome to the show.
If you don't mind, Dee, let's keep this one real quick, because we do have lots of people on the call, and I do know that you go to the Talk Heathen after show and have those conversations as well, so we can expand on it there. Sure. But quickly ask your question, and then I'll respond as quickly as I can to it.
Well, I have always viewed Buddhism more as a process, and had never really thought of the idea of reincarnation as a punishment. So I'm wondering, does karma follow from life to life, or is it only operative during a single life, or is it a combination of both?
It's first of all, I'd just like to point out that it's not a punishment. It's very difficult in trying, when coming from a Western background and a Western perspective, and looking at Buddhist texts and things to kind of ascertain the kind of subtleties of the meanings of them, especially when you're looking at some of the more antiquated texts, some of the early translators of those texts who were very, very good and have given us a very, very good library of work from which to work from. But they were writing for a Western audience, and as such, they used Western terms to describe things. So rather than saying, they'd use translations such as good and evil for things. And what Buddhism actually means, there is no concepts of good and evil in those absolute kind of rights in Buddhism. What the Buddhist kind of ethical system points to is, rather than having good and evil things, is it has stuff which is beneficial towards the path of enlightenment, and those things which are a hindrance to a path towards enlightenment. Now, if you understand this and you read in some of these antiquated texts, it's not so much a problem. When you don't understand this, you can get a completely different meaning from those texts. So it's very important to understand the subtleties and the difference in translation between these modern texts and these older texts. And we also have the problem that, we've got Pali texts, which is a dead language. is not used anywhere outside of the Buddhist texts. We've got texts written in Sanskrit, which is kind of a cousin of Pali, but it's still used. We've got texts written in early Buddhist texts written in Chinese. So we've got all these different translation kind of things to work through while we're going through. Regarding the specific question of is it just one life or is it multiple lives? There is no demarcation line between we do things in this one life. We get punished for stuff just in this one life. And I'm using that punishment word just because you used it. There are bad results of our actions from this life, which go into a next life. It doesn't work like that. That we have had, according to the Buddhist scriptures, we have had countless lives before. There is a beginningless beginning in Buddhism. We have had countless lives, and it is the accumulation of actions, both positive towards the path and negative, which are hindrances towards the path, which have created these kind of karmic streams that we follow. So it's impossible just to pull it out and say, right, this is what the result of this in particular action and will be played out in this way. Does that answer your question?
Actually, it does, Richard. Thanks very much.
No problem. I'm going to let you go, Dee. I'll if you want to talk further on the subject, I will be in the after show.
For sure.
Thank you for that, Scott.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dee. We'll talk to you more in the after show. This is one of the reasons that I love being on the show when Richard's on too, because I always learn quite a bit about things that I didn't know before. So I appreciate that, Richard. Before we dive into another call, I think like I mentioned, we're getting a little pile going of these super chats here. So I think maybe we should read off some of these super chats and give kind of a sneak peek of the mock scripture that we're going to be generating in a little while here. So first we have from Nero, and this is for $5. Petrichor, love you guys. Did I say that right? Petrichor, love you guys. Every week I see you is a good week. All right. Thanks a lot, Nero, for that. So Petrichor will be added to our list. Next up, we have Shubham Patil, donating 40 Indian rupees. Says, love to Richard, Scott, and Talk Heathen. And so we are plucking out Talk Heathen out of that sentence there, and we'll be incorporating that into our little bit later on. Next up, we have here's somebody we're familiar with, Blind Limey, member of 1 year, donating $10, who says, this super chat does not represent a conflict of interest. Of course, we would never assume that. We would never assume that, Jamie. So we appreciate that donation, definitely. Next up, we have Miranda Rensberger, member of 1 year, $10. Sesquipedalian. That's it. That's the whole thing right there. So I guess that word will also be added in there. Thank you, Miranda. Miranda's been busy. Miranda has another one, another $10 donation, still a member of 1 year. Snickerdoodle. All right. So we're going to spice it up a little bit there with Snickerdoodle. I love Snickerdoodles, by the way. So I appreciate that, Miranda. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Aditya Shankar, and is donating, was that €2? Is that a euro there? I think it's €2. We'll go with that. Oxymoron. Oxymoron is something that you never, ever see in a biblical phrase or anything like that. So I'm sure that will be definitely a challenge to work into it. Next up, we have Jonathan's Focus on Folly. All right, $2 donation there. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. All right, so putting us to the test on that one, I think. Thanks a lot, Jonathan, for that. Next up, we have Herbie Shine donating £5. Is that a British pound there?
That's
Richard,
a British pound. Yes, that is a British pound.
All right. It says, Richard, stop saying cake. I'm a diabetic, and you're using your atheist mind tricks on me to try and tempt me. Get behind me, Satan. And that phrase at the end there, get behind me, Satan, we're taking that and we're throwing that into our scripture as well. So no more of this cake talk, Richard. Come on. Be considerate. Be considerate here. Next up, we have Miranda Rensberger with another donation for $10. Let's see if I can get this one right. Floxinocine hilipilification. I think that's right. I saw that movie too, by the way. Floxinoxine hilipilification. All right, so good contribution there from Miranda Rensberger. Next up, they just keep coming. The hits keep coming here. Dustin King, member 1 month, donated $5. Says, it sounds like to Buddhists, existence in this world is hell. I feel like if I knew I'd reincarnate, that would be a relief. Word is octopuses. Okay, so does that reflect well with your view on Buddhism there? Is our existence here the Buddhist hell?
No, there are hell realms within Buddhism, though, so you can be reincarnated into a hell realm. There are 32, I think it is, realms of existence in Buddhism, all the way up from gods who live an extraordinarily long time in luxury. It's not actually a good realm to be reborn into, because you use up all the good karma you've accumulated living these lives of luxury, and you're so caught up in these pleasures that you kind of use up your good karma, so it takes you further away from the kind of enlightenment goal, and all the way down to the hell realms. There are realms of ghosts and all sorts of different wonderful creatures in between as well.
So you're saying it can get worse?
It can get worse, yes.
All right. That's good to know. All right, next up we have yet another from Miranda Rensberger. I think what we're going to be writing here is the gospel according to Miranda. Miranda, another $10 donation here for Bumfuzzle. Okay, Bumfuzzle. That sounds like a fun
There is a t-shirt idea, by the way. The gospel according to Miranda.
That could be. All right, next up we have No God Required, donated $5. Great show, Scott and Richard. And I apologize for this word in advance, anti-disestablishmentarianism. Boy, the words are coming out here. Anti-disestablishmentarianism. We are ready. This will be definitely a challenge. Last one, we have a super chat from Godwin, which ironically does not mention Nazis at all. Godwin donated $4.99. Said, thank you for what you do. You're welcome, Godwin. We love doing this. And so it's a real pleasure to have the opportunity to do this. We are going to take the words thank you out of your super chat there and add that to the gospel according to Miranda. Lastly, we have a donation from our president for $5. Says, here's a toast to all the keyboard warriors, especially drink water.
That sounds like a challenge to drink water to call in to me.
Okay. All right. So drink water must be somebody in the chat. Is that what we're looking at there?
Yeah,
Drink water is what we're going to be adding into the to our scripture there at the end. And lastly, we have, wait a minute here. We got Kelly Laughlin here, member 2 years, donating $2. Zoroastrian. That was his word, Zoroastrian. So Kelly, who also definitely does not have any conflicts of interest, especially since he is our guest host, or our backup host, not our guest host, our backup host today, and also is a host on Truth Wanted. So maybe he's slipping a few dollars to the enemy here in Truth Wanted.
You know, I didn't think we brought in enough money to be what's the word I'm looking at? We didn't bring in enough money last night that we're going to win. So I figured I might as well just jump ship and be a part of the
That's
Heathen.
Exactly what you've done.
Right. So you're just a fair weather fan? Is that what you're saying? Fair weather backup host?
I'm not a fair weather fan. I'm just smart and know where to go, or I just know where to go where the winners are at.
Stick with the winners. All right.
And I want to just remind everybody that this weekend is my birthday weekend, and you can celebrate my birthday by sending money into a super chat. And if you don't, I am just going to cry all weekend, and you don't want me crying on my birthday. So
that's going to be bad. Yeah, we don't want to cry.
Give us money for Kelly's birthday. And I'd just like to say on that point, by the way, if the Cross-Examiner and Secularity are watching right now, you've got some work to do, motherfuckers. Come on, buttons being thrown down.
All right, Richard is talking some smack here. Talking smack. Boy, I hope we don't have to eat crow on that one. But yeah, so thank you for all the super chats and keep them coming in. We'll keep the tally there. We'll keep track of the words you send in, and we'll throw it all together at the end of the episode here. So let's, should we take another call, Richard? What do you think?
Absolutely. We've got some theists online, quite a few.
We do have some theists on the line. Yeah. So let's go down to, let's talk to Nick, him from South Africa. Nick disagrees with the host's take on Christianity and would like to answer any questions. Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
Good, good, Nick. So you are saying that you disagree. I'm assuming. Do you mean just us, or do you mean all of the hosts in general? What do you think we're getting wrong on Christianity?
So honestly, first thing I want to talk about is that being a Christian is someone someone who's perfect. And as a Christian, I think that we all make mistakes, right? So at first, I was listening to your whereby you were talking about you going to a Christian school, I think, and you were talking about you seeing people who are doing things against the Bible. And honestly, I feel like if you're not a person who reads the Bible, you wouldn't understand the fact that we are not perfect. So I think that with you saying that we as Christians do not do what the Lord tells us, I think it's a lie.
I don't think any of us have said that Christians were supposed to be perfect. Did Richard, have you said that?
No, that's not.
No?
This whole call has kind of got me a little bit confused, Nick, if you don't mind me saying, because you've the kind of call screening notes say that you disagree with the host's take on Christianity. Now, for me, and I can only speak for myself, I can't speak for any of the other hosts. My take on Christianity from the kind of theological point of view, because there are lots of different theologies. There are lots of different kind of Christian beliefs. I come from a background of religious studies, and in religious studies we say there are Christianities, not Christianity, because there are so many different belief systems within what is labeled as the umbrella term Christianity. So my take on Christianity is largely taken from the people who call in, or the people who I talk to on other platforms, and what they're telling me that their particular belief is. I don't particularly have a take on Christianity, a solid take on Christianity as an umbrella term, without it taking into account what the people I'm talking to actually believe.
Right.
And so I find it's quite confusing for me that you would disagree with my take on Christianity, because largely my take on Christianity would be the person I'm talking to, unless we're just going to make a blanket statement and say, which is the only accurate statement I can make about. Sorry, go on, Nick.
Okay, number one, what I was going at wasn't what you truly said about Christianity, right? It was about, I don't know whoever said it, who said that he or she went to a Christian school and started talking about Christians not acting the way they are supposed to act. That's what I'm going at here. And before you continue or you answer me, firstly, I'd like to tell you that I got school tomorrow. So just know that I only have 2 minutes left. But besides that, that's what I'm going at. That's what I'm questioning. That's what I want to answer. That's the question I want to answer, actually, is that one of you right there just said that you went to a Christian school, right?
Right, and that we saw actions that Christians weren't supposed to do. Is that? I mean, I don't recall saying that, but I have seen activity done by Christians that didn't seem to go along with what their book says. I mean, is there something specific that you wanted to? I mean, what are we saying that's kind of misrepresenting Christianity here? Because I agree with Richard. I usually, if I'm talking to somebody who's religious, I'm not going to impose my view of religion on them. I want to talk to them where they're at. I want to go with what they believe, and then take it from there.
Nick, I'm conscious that you're short of time, so let's take an example I've already used in today's show. There was a Christian called Thornton Stringfellow, Reverend Thornton Stringfellow, who wrote books that described the Bible as giving good reason for slavery, for the American slave trade. Now, I'm assuming, and I don't want to make assumptions, but I'm going to make the assumption, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that you do not agree with that statement of this fellow Christian of yours. Now, he believed he was acting in accordance with Christianity. you believe I think I would be right in saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, would disagree with that sentiment. So what is wrong with one of our hosts, and I don't know who you're referring to particularly, but what is wrong with one of our hosts saying Christians don't behave in the way that they're supposed to behave, if you would agree with that sentiment?
So firstly, I'm going to give you a biblical answer on that. So firstly, as you told me about that particular dude who you said right now, right? Say that there is what you call a lukewarm Christian, right? And a lukewarm Christian is someone who only believes in God, like by just saying it, who doesn't actually believe. It's just someone who just says it to blend in. So I feel like people who just read the Bible without wanting to know what the message is are just what you call fake Christian.
But Nick, I asked you a question. Nick, I need to interrupt you. Very, very sorry, but I do need to interrupt you. First of all, you're making what's called a not a true Scotsman fallacy there. So, go and look that up in your own time and, have a look at what that means. But secondly, I asked you a specific question about the Reverend Thornton Stringfellow, who advocated, he wrote books, he was a reverend, he taught Christianity, he preached from the pulpit, and he believed that the Bible said it was okay for people to own slaves in the kind of American slave trade. He wrote books defending that slave trade. And my question to you is, if your charge is that we are making the kind of a false assessment when we say that Christians don't behave how they behave, and you agree with us that Thornton Stringfellow is wrong for writing those books, for saying that the Bible defends the slave trade, I would assume you agree with us on that point. So how can we be wrong by saying he's not behaving the way Christians should behave, if in your own view, Christians shouldn't behave in that way?
So you seem to be agreeing with our take on that. Nick, are you still there? Oh, I think we may have lost Nick.
I'm still here.
Oh, okay. So what do you think about what Richard just had to say?
Okay, so firstly, before I answer that, what I was aiming at here, you just told me about a person who is saying that the Bible allows people to have slaves. Am I wrong or am I right?
No, that was he was advocating for slavery. Yes,
right.
Oh, okay. So what if I showed you something that proved that is a lie?
I'd rather you answer the question I asked you rather than go into something else, because the question: do you disagree with that Christian saying that the Bible demonstrates slavery is true? That the Bible advocates for slavery. Do you disagree with that person?
I disagree.
Right. So if you disagree with them,
yes, I disagree.
Then and you think that Christianity says that we should not hold either doesn't advocate for slavery, or that we actively shouldn't own slaves, two slightly different things, but they both disagree with Thornton Stringfellow, a Christian, you would then be agreeing with our host who said that some Christians do not behave the way that Christians should behave, according to the Christianity that you hold to. So how can you criticize our host for saying that when you would agree with us on that point? That is my question.
No, it's just that you took this in a different perspective, honestly, because what I wanted to say was, number one, I think it was the host who was talking about him going to a Christian school, and those people who said they're Christians were not acting according to the Bible. You understand?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying, Nick. Sorry again for interrupting, but it's you keep returning to the same thing, and I appreciate what you're saying. And I'm accepting what you're saying. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, that our host said that people weren't behaving in the sign of Christianity. But my question is, on the subjects in which you agree with us on, if we were to say that Reverend Thornton Stringfellow is not acting in accordance with Christianity, is not acting in accordance with the Bible for advocating for the slave trade using biblical texts as a defense, how can you then say that we are wrong for saying that they are not acting in accordance with that when you agree with us on that point? It's the methodology I'm trying to point out.
You keep on dodging.
No, I'm not dodging anything. I'm talking specifically about the methodology we are using. I'm talking specifically about the methodology. And you're criticizing one of our hosts for doing exactly what you are doing. You have done it yourself in this call and said that person is not a true Christian.
Oh, my God.
So
that's what we're trying to get at here.
My real question on this, honestly, was I wanted to answer or tell you a different view of what the host said about going to a Christian school. And at this point,
that's fine. That's fine. Why does that matter? Why does it matter? Why does it matter to you what we think of Christianity? It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter what Christianity is or isn't. What matters to me is somebody that I'm talking to says they believe in a God, and I ask them why. It doesn't matter if they call themselves Christian. It doesn't matter if they call themselves Muslim. It doesn't matter if they call themselves Buddhist. Whatever. Okay, to me, it's not religion specifically is not what I'm interested in discussing, other than as a context for discussing beliefs in the supernatural, beliefs in a God, beliefs in religious, religious traditions and that kind of thing. Okay, it doesn't matter to me if you want to say they're not Christian, fine. There's lots of people out there that would say you're not Christian too, and they will have Bible verses to back them up too. And so this is nothing new. Christians calling each other not real Christians, as Richard was pointing out, the Scotsman pointing out the no true Scotsman fallacy here. And so what is that going to get us? So even if you do disagree, which it sounds like you actually agreed with this other host, but even if you did disagree, so what? So you're a Christian, you believe in a God. Why do you believe in that God? That would be a question that was interesting to me, at least.
Honestly, I don't believe in that person, because you just said at this point I feel like you're aiming towards a different topic, whereby
No, we're not, Nick. What we're trying to do is get to the core of the topic you've called in for, to actually get into the actual methodology of the question that you have asked. That's why I asked you specifically that question, Nick, because I took it away from our host and took it to and the people that they were commenting on, and I brought it round to a specific Christian who I was confident, and you've agreed with this, who I was confident you would actually disagree with. And that's why I used Thornton Stringfellow as an example. Now, if we're looking at the methodology of what is being done, you're disagreeing with our host for saying that these people aren't acting in accordance with Christianity. And yet you would say that very same thing about the Reverend Thornton Stringfellow. So from the methodological point of view, you are doing the same thing as our host is doing, but yet you're criticizing our host for doing it. So my question has been, why are you criticizing my host, our host, for doing the same thing that you're doing?
How is that criticizing?
Right. So, Nick, I asked you quite specifically, if you agreed the Reverend Thornton Stringfellow, by advocating for slavery, using the Bible as evidence to advocate for slavery, if you would agree that that is not good Christian behavior, and you said, yes, that is not good Christian behavior, that is not what a Christian should do. And yet the criticism you gave our host was that they should not say of these Christians in this Bible school, that is not what Christians should do. So the methodology of what you are doing is precisely what our host is doing, and yet you said our host should not do that. Do you understand the difficulty?
Was oh my God. Okay, I get your point. But what I was pointing at here is that you believe in just because I'm Christian doesn't mean that I have to be perfect. And according to what the host said, he said that as he a Christian school, he tended to see people who call themselves Christians doing something else, something against the Bible.
Stop there. Nick. No, Nick, I agree with you. I agree with you. Nick, I agree with you. I'm trying to get to the core of this. So I agree with what you've said. Our host said that they were not acting in accordance with Christianity. They were not doing what in the Bible. They were not doing what Christians should do. I'm also pointing out that is exactly what you did regarding the Reverend Thornton Stringfellow. So you have taken a Christian, just like our host, and you have said that Christian is not acting in accordance with the Bible, and yet your kind of reasoning for why the people at this Christian school were doing it was they are not perfect. But yet you can still criticize the Reverend Thornton Stringfellow, and he's not perfect as well, but yet you're quite happy to voice your displeasure and your disagreement with him. Do you understand that you're doing exactly the same thing that our host did? The very thing you were criticizing them for?
Oh my God. Yo, bro. Oh my God. It's just, yo. It's like,
do you have an answer for Richard or not?
My own language, but nah, it's fine. What was the question again?
The question, unfortunately, we'll have to wait because we do have two more callers I want to get to, and I think we've had the time, and you have said you haven't got much time left yourself.
Okay,
go, Nick. Listen back to the call. Listen back to the call, and I hope that in listening back without having the pressures of having to have the conversation with us, I hope in listening back you grasp what it is I'm trying to say to you. And if you do get that, give us a call back and let's continue the conversation. I do appreciate your call, Nick, but we do have other callers on the line. We have got quite a lot of stuff to get through, including the top 5 patrons who I'm going to read out now.
All right, so let's do it.
Top 5 patrons are Oops, all singularity, Dingleby Jackson, Kalevi, Helveti, Brian Zupke, I'm wrong in every way, sorry, Brian. And
let's just roll with it, man.
Colton, an honourable mention to Diane, Marie, Leonard. Thank you very much. All of you. Right. You can all become patrons. You do so much for the show by supporting us on Patreon. We really, really do appreciate it. As we say every week, we have started recording the Talk Heathen Discord after shows for all levels of paid patrons. You will notice that there haven't been any on for a while. We've had a death in the family, and I have been exceptionally busy, so I have got to catch up with all that stuff. They will be resuming at the beginning of March, so if you've been missing that content, we've not stopped doing it. I'm the one who edits it and posts them. I've just been really, really busy. I've had a lot of stuff on. I am going to get back to it come March, so if you're excited for that stuff, it will be coming back, and I apologize for the delay in those things. We are going to take another theist, Everett from Oregon, who wants to know how you detect and prevent dogmatic thinking. Everett, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. So you want to know how to prevent dogmatic thinking?
Yeah.
In what respect? Have you got a particular example?
Yeah. So I'm deconverting, and this all kind of started from watching Forrest's videos. And at some point, dogmatic thinking was mentioned, and I kind of looked at what I believed and stuff, and I realized that I have a lot of like habits, I guess, to just build up dogmatic thinking. Because I figured that out by thinking of the stuff I believe in life. What if the person who like started that disbelieved? For example, and Forrest didn't like convince me of evolution, but if Forrest stopped believing in evolution, would that give me pause in evolution? And it would. I don't think it would deconvince me, but at the time it would. And so that kind of made me realize that there were a lot of stuff that it's really easy for me to just start believing in something because someone I trust or someone I think is super knowledgeable in the field believes in it. So I'm wondering, how do I? Well,
Everett, I think I can give you an answer, at least the way I would approach this. And first of all, I think you've taken the first step. You know, if you're looking to detect and prevent dogmatic thinking, it can be a challenge to do that for yourself. And so I kudos to you for the self-reflection that you're going through. I think that's really the first step that you need to do, and to detect dogmatic thinking in yourself is to be reflective, think about your thinking process. But in general, I would say to you, I'm a math teacher during my secret life during the daytime, and one thing I say to my students all the time, I'm sure you've heard this before: show your work. Okay, so that's one way that you can both detect and prevent dogmatic thinking, is by not only showing your work and your own thinking, but also asking for anybody else you're talking to show their work. Just ask them why. And so you can ask that to yourself, and you can analyze your own beliefs, and then you can decide, do I have a good solid foundation for that? Or do they have a good solid foundation for what they're saying? By showing your work, you have something that you can examine. You have something that you can pick at. You have something that you can compare to other approaches to problems that you might think are good approaches. And so self-reflection, self-examination, asking the why question, show your work. What do you think about that? Is that something that you've been doing during your deconversion or not?
Yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Okay, well, so doing that, I think, is really the first step in the right direction. You just keep up with that. Don't settle. I mean, I know it's going to be, especially if it's a belief that you happen to believe in, it can be very easy to examine your reasoning, to show your work, and then to dismiss it or gloss it over a little bit. And so really take out the magnifying glass, especially when you're examining your own beliefs. It's much easier for us to detect flaws in others' reasoning system. It can be very challenging and very difficult for us to detect that kind of thing in ourselves. And the main reason is that our brains have evolved to make us feel good, to make us feel like we're being effective, to make us feel like we're doing a good thing. And so very often, we will have these false beliefs that we're doing something the right way, that we are doing what we need to do. And so constant reflection and meta reflection too, reflect about how you're reflecting and that kind of thing. It's just the more you know, really, I guess, the more information that you can get about the process, the more that you can detect fallacies, the more you'll be able to detect flaws in reasoning, the more you'll be able to detect things like unsupported assumptions and that kind of thing. I don't know, Richard, I've been talking for a little while. Do you have anything to add on this?
I think that's great advice, Scott. And I think in these spaces, I have a lot to do, both academically and otherwise, through religious studies and philosophy on an academic level, and just kind of talking on social media to people as well. So I have a lot of these conversations with a lot of these people. I think it's important to realize and to understand that it's not just atheists who are prone to bad thinking. It's not just atheists who are prone to believing things without showing the work. Theists who are prone to believing things without showing the work. And don't think that deconstructing from religious belief will in and of itself suddenly give you all the answers, because I talk to lots and lots of atheists online who have less reasoning skills than the religious people they're talking to, Trust me, I really, really do. And it is so frustrating when they're kind of representing the team and they're talking so much shit. And, you know, it's really, really important, I think, to recognize that getting, you know, deconstructing from religious faith and whatever faith you've come from doesn't mean that you're suddenly going to become immune to bad ideas and bad thinking. And as Scott says, you've taken the first step. And look at it like this, you know, if you want to follow a particular diet and you don't want to eat a certain kind of food, and you automatically open the fridge and take that food out and chomp it down, that's what a lot of us do on an everyday basis. You've taken the first step. You've got to the point now when you get to the fridge door and open it, you can stop and you can say to yourself, right, I'm in a position now where I've got a choice of what to do, where I can work through my thinking and my ideas, whether I reach into that food and pull out that thing. And it's at that particular point when that awareness comes to you, when you become aware of those kind of processes going off in your head, that you're being convinced by something that may be a bad idea, that someone said something at a position of authority, and you think, I really trust that person. Yeah, that makes sense because they've said it. When that trigger goes off, when that opening the fridge door goes off and you become aware, that is the point where you can do the work and you can say, right, now I need to do the working out. And it's a lot of the work, a lot of the problems come because we don't do that. Because we just go with the flow and we don't have that trigger point, or when we do have that trigger point, we just kind of ignore it and throw it to the side because it might be a bit uncomfortable for us. But when we get to that point where we've got the opportunity to think things through, take the time. This isn't something you've got to do. You don't have to deconstruct in a day. It's not something that you have to do immediately and kind of rush through. Take the time to think these ideas through. And there might be ideas that you might be convinced of. You might be really, really convinced of some of the things I don't know who you're listening to, but let's say it's a religious apologist. And let's remember, religious apologists are there not to convince the atheists, to convince the people who are on the fence. That's what they do. And when you become aware, when you're listening to these people and you've been convinced by these arguments, take the time to kind of say, right, I need to really assess this and go and look at all the different sides of the argument. Go and look at the research. And it's really important to understand what look at the research means, because it doesn't mean come and listen to me talking about evolution from my atheist perspective, because I am not a biologist. Do the research means go to the appropriate sources and look at the appropriate sources for the subject you're talking about and see what the literature says on that source. And that will inform you. And when you are properly informed, that is what gives you the strength to be able to make the right decision in things. And I think that is building on what Scott said about doing the work. I think it's so important to know where to do the work, the right sources to go to do the work, and setting those trigger points up so you can be aware to do the work in the first place. Does that make any sense, either what me or Scott have said to you?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes
sense. I think I would add on top of Richard too. He was saying about don't expect to be deconverted overnight, and I really want to stress that point too. As you're going through a deconversion process, as you're doing this analysis of your own beliefs, cut yourself a little bit of slack. Some of the habits are hard to change overnight, and so this can take time. You can trust in the fact that you are using a good methodology, and trust in the fact that you are at least aware of your own reactions, and don't expect an instant gratification on your abandoning, quote unquote, abandoning of dogmatic thinking. It's not something that you can just shove aside just all at once and then move on. So cut yourself a little bit of slack and trust that, you know, it's about making progress, not about achieving perfection. Okay. And that goes for when you're talking about somebody else too. If they don't instantly take your advice and they don't instantly change your mind, that doesn't mean that you didn't have an impact on them. And that doesn't mean that they won't be thinking about the words you said later on. Okay. And so, focus on your methodology, focus on your approach, show your work, hold yourself accountable to yourself. I would also add in making sure you talk to other people, not only to get their opinion, but to call yourself out, to make sure that you're not lying to yourself. It's very easy to tell yourself you're doing something and then not do it. And so if you do it publicly and not necessarily like in front of a bunch of people, but at least in front of people, then our instinct to satisfy people that are around us kicks in. And so if you tell somebody that you're thinking something or that you're going to do something, that's a way that you can hold yourself accountable for those kind of things. So Everett, we've been talking a lot here. We'll give you the final say. What are your thoughts on what we've been saying?
I think the things you have said have made a lot of sense. I have told some of my friends and stuff, so I am keeping myself accountable in at least that way.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
What kind of reaction did you get from your friends when you said those things?
One of them already was an atheist, and so they're pretty supportive. The other one kind of got into a debate with me about it. Mm-hmm. And that kind of got concluded unresolved, basically.
So far?
I ended up saying it were... What?
You're saying it was unresolved. I'm just saying maybe it's unresolved so far, but you don't know. You know, maybe you'll be able to resolve it at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. No, they ended up saying they were, I think, an agnostic absurdist. But then they also, and then they said they like go to church and stuff because it's convenient. I don't know. They said their like philosophy was kind of complex and they didn't have a whole lot of time to explain it.
Feel free to get them to call the show.
Exactly.
Yeah, I can ask them.
And look, Everett, of course, you are more than welcome to give us a call whenever you want as well and kind of go through specific things. You know, it's not a lot of people kind of criticize us on this show for wanting to deconvert religious people. And that is, I don't think that's it's not my aim. And I don't think it's the aim of any of the hosts that I know of to actually actively go out and do that. We just want to give people better toolboxes to assess the information around them. And yes, as a natural byproduct of that, I think deconversion is inevitable in a lot of cases. But I don't set out to stop someone being religious. I have got a lot of religious friends. I've got a lot of religious peers. And never once do I sit there and try and get them to come out of their religious belief. That's not me. And I think it's very, very important to kind of not hold too higher standards to try and achieve. You know, just get yourself, don't look at it as a matter of coming out of a particular faith. Just look at it of assessing the world around you better. You know, saying this is the way I used to assess the world. I can identify where that is not a good way of assessing things because I had these erroneous beliefs, and I can identify where they were erroneous. And now I'm getting a better toolbox to assess the world around me and kind of view it like that. And so then you're not putting pressure on yourself of having an end goal. You're not putting the pressure on yourself of, of having specific arguments with religious people. You know, look at more of a way of you just kind of giving yourself better tools to assess the world with. And I think that's a very helpful thing to do for anyone, regardless of whether they're religious or not.
Yeah, that seems like a lot.
Yeah, well, you can always listen back to the call and break it down into little bits. We do post the videos up, so you do have a chance to kind of break it down and play it on half speed. Everett, I'm going to let you go. Thank you very much for your call. I do appreciate it. I especially like listening to people's journeys about deconversion, because I was never in a position where I had that religious faith to deconvert from. So I do appreciate listening to people's stories and people talking about how they're going. I do wish Thomas had have phoned in with his philosophical argument. I did ask him to phone in again, and I specifically wanted he was complaining about last week's hosts not being equipped to have the conversation with him. And
the opportunity is right here.
I said, if you want to have that conversation, my degree is in philosophy, partly in religious studies. I want to have those conversations. You had the opportunity to call Thomas and you didn't take it. Please, next time I'm on, give me a call. If you're not happy with the host that you're talking to, and there's one who wants to talk to you, give that host a call. This has been my stick for the entire night when I'm imploring people to call. When you're unhappy with something that the hosts are saying and you've got the opportunity to address things, do so. We have some more super chats.
Yeah, we got a couple of super chats. Let's get those out here. So we had another one here from Less Than Lucid for 666. It's Aromatic Awareness Week. No matter how romantic, enjoy responsibly. The marked down chocolate. Okay, and chocolate we're throwing into the to the mix here. And then lastly, from Truth 666, member 1 year, $10. Happy birthday, Kelly. All right. And speaking of Kelly, I want to thank our backup host, Kelly. So we really appreciate you hanging out with us today, Kelly.
Hey, thanks.
What are your thoughts of the show today?
I thought it was actually a really good show. I wish that some of our theist callers that were in the chat had called in, especially Drinkwater. I do want to say, though, that even though Drinkwater didn't call in, he did help me pick my tie out today in the 24/7 chat beforehand. So I thank you for that, at least.
All right. And so with that last super chat, we now have the parable of the atheist. Here I present to you the parable of the atheist. And lo, in the days of much speaking and little listening, there came a man unto the city, and his name was Kelly. He was a man of reason and of wit, yet in the eyes of the people, he was a heretic, for he believed not in the gods of his fathers, nor in the omens of the sky. One day, as Kelly sat upon a stone in the marketplace, enjoying a snickerdoodle with a cup of hot chocolate, there approached to him a priest robed in fine linen, who spoke with great pomp and sesquipedalian flourish. O Kelly, have you not heard the wisdom of the ancients? Have you not trembled before the sacred words? Your very existence is a flaxenoxynilification if you believe in nothing beyond the flesh. Kelly wiped the crumbs from his beard and smiled. Friend, I hear you, but I see no gods. I hear thunder and the smell of the petrichor after the rain, yet no divine voice speaks therein. It is but the cycle of nature. Why do you seek to make an oxymoron of faith and reason as though they cannot walk together? The priest scoffed, raising his hands. You're a fool. You speak as one who has never known truth. Get behind me, Satan. Kelly chuckled. Indeed, if Satan is doubt, then I am his most devoted servant. Yet it is not a conflict of interest to call me lost while refusing to consider that you may be wrong. Talk, heathen, you say. But would you listen? Oh, I like what they did with the talk heathen there. As he spoke, a scholar passed by, burdened with scrolls, muttering of anti-disestablishmentarianism and the fate of kings. An old woman, wise yet weary, sat beside Kelly and nodded. The man speaks true, she said. The priest fumed. Do you not see the danger? Without faith, we are bumfuzzled, wandering as blind men in the storm. Kelly took a bite of his snickerdoodle, savoring its sweetness. Perhaps, he said, but I would rather be lost with honesty than found in folly. If a thing is true, let it be true with or without belief. And if it is false, no amount of supercalifragilisticexpialidocious chanting will make it so. The people murmured, some nodded, others scoffed, but none could answer him. Even the priest in his heart knew no reply. Then Kelly rose, brushing crumbs from his robe. Thank you for your time, he said, and walked away. And the people stood in silence, pondering his words as octopuses ponder the depths of the sea. All right. So thank you to all of our donors today. That was pretty awesome. And we really appreciate all of the dollars that you sent. Hopefully it was enough to push us over that big mountain of the atheist experience that we're now facing. Just before we head out, I want to remind you the prompt for this week is, how did Noah keep the animals in line? Reply in the comments below and tune in at the beginning of next week's episode to hear our top 3 answers. Also, all 3 of us are going to be on the ACD after show, so you can go to tiny.cc/ACD Discord after the show and talk to us. And so last little bit, we got to get some love rings out there too. Let's throw some love rings. Have them come out of Kelly's forehead right there. We got some love rings going there. It always reminds me of the old... we lost
Kelly.
Now it's Jesus. Jesus is giving us the love rings. Okay, Jesus, as he's buying his slaves, right?
Come back with no love rings.
Yeah, well, you missed your opportunity there.
You know what, crew? We love you anyway.
Definitely, for sure. There we go. There's love rings coming out of Kelly there. I was just going to say, it reminds me of the old Aquaman from the Super Friends. He would talk to fish. So maybe this is Kelly talking to all the rocks out in the field out there. So as closing, I just wanted to say, if you don't believe, this is your community and we appreciate you being here. But if you do believe, we don't hate you.
We're just not convinced. See you next time.
Not convinced. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.